There's a question that keeps us awake at night, a question whispered in hospital rooms, muttered in empty houses, screamed into pillows when no one can hear. Why? Why do good people suffer? Why does the innocent child get sick while the corrupt man prospers? Why does the faithful woman lose everything while those who mock God gain more? This isn't philosophy. This isn't theology. This is your life, your pain, your unanswered prayer. 4,000 years ago, a man asked the same question. His name was Job. And what happened to him will change everything you thought you knew about suffering. Because Job didn't just lose his wealth. He didn't just lose his health. He lost his children. He lost his dignity. He lost his friends. And then he lost his certainty about God. But what he found in that darkness is why we're still telling his story today. This is not a fairy tale. This is not a sermon. This is a mystery wrapped in suffering, concealed in silence. And by the time we're done, you'll understand why the most important book in your Bible might be the one you've been avoiding. Welcome to the story of Job. Let me tell you about a man who did everything right. Job wasn't just wealthy. He was generous. He wasn't just successful. He was humble. He wasn't just religious. He was authentic. The ancient text describes him with 4 words that should terrify us: blameless and upright, not perfect, integrated, whole. His private life matched his public image. His worship matched his wallet. He was the man everyone wanted to be. 10 children, thriving businesses, respect from every corner of society. He woke up early to pray, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He offered sacrifices for his children's potential sins, just in case they had cursed God in their hearts. This wasn't Sunday morning religion. This was a man whose entire existence was oriented around honoring God. And here's what haunts me about Job's story. If you asked anyone in his town why Job was so blessed, they would have said, because he deserves it, because he's righteous, because God rewards the faithful. They built their entire theology on Job's prosperity. And that theology was about to be obliterated, because something was happening that Job couldn't see. Something behind the curtain of heaven. A conversation that would cost him everything. The scene shifts. We're no longer on earth. We're in the throne room of heaven. Angels present themselves before God, and among them is Satan, not a cartoon villain, the accuser, the one who questions motives, the one who asks uncomfortable questions about human faith. And God does something unexpected. He brings
Have you
up Job.
considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him.
God initiates the conversation, and Satan responds with a question that cuts to the core of human faith.
Does Job fear God for nothing?
In other words, of course, Job worships you. Look at his life. Look at his blessings. Look at the protection. His faith isn't pure. It's profitable. He doesn't love you. He loves what you give him. And here's the unsettling part. Satan isn't attacking God. He's attacking the idea that authentic faith even exists, that anyone would love God without benefits, that worship could survive loss. And God allows the test, not to punish Job, but to prove something profound, that faith can exist without rewards, that love for God can survive pain, that devotion doesn't have to be transactional. But Job has no idea this conversation ever happened, and in Job's eyes, pure contentment, laugh lines carved by years of joy, a smile that speaks of a life well lived, a beard full and dignified, a man at peace with God and man. And oh, the feasts, long tables bending beneath the weight of blessing. Fruits of every color, purple grapes, golden dates, crimson pomegranates, bread broken warm from the oven, meat roasted to perfection, and seated all around, his 10 children laughing, talking, celebrating life itself. Watch his daughters dance, flowing robes of pink and lavender and mint green, spinning like flowers in the wind. Their father watching, pride blazing in his heart like a sacred flame. But Job's greatness was not measured in possessions alone. See him walk his lands, and everywhere he passes, workers bow. Not from fear, but from respect. For this was a man who understood that with great blessing comes great responsibility. At the village gates, the poor gathered, and Job's servants came forth, arms laden with baskets of bread, hands filled with silver coins. The hungry were fed, the naked were clothed, the widow and orphan found shelter under his protection. His reputation spread like dawn across the hills. Job is righteous, Job is just, Job fears God and turns away from evil. In the quiet hours before sunrise, while his household slept, Job would kneel at his altar, incense rising like prayer itself toward heaven, hands lifted in devotion. A man who knew that every blessing flows from the hand of the Almighty, and to the Almighty thanksgiving must return. Fields stretching to the horizon, flocks numbering in the thousands, buildings, servants, family, honor, respect, all that a man could desire or deserve. Job stands with arms spread wide, gratitude pouring from his soul like wine from an overflowing cup. The sun behind him creates a crown of light. He is strong. He is blessed. He is complete. His youngest daughter places flowers upon his head, and they smile together. Father and child, bound by love that knows no shadow. He doesn't know he's part of something cosmic. He doesn't know his suffering has meaning beyond what he can see. He just knows that one morning he woke up blessed, and by sunset, his world was gone. Raiders steal his livestock, servants are murdered, fire consumes his flocks. More raiders, more deaths. Loss stacking on loss so fast there's no time to grieve. And then the final messenger arrives, the one who can barely speak. The house where all 10 of Job's children were gathered collapsed. 7 sons, 3 daughters, gone. In one moment. Job doesn't know why. There is no explanation, no warning, no chance to prepare. And instead of cursing God, Job falls to the ground and worships. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. It's not calm acceptance, it's shattered worship. But the test isn't over, because Satan comes back. And this time, the accusation is darker. I want you to imagine that phone call. I want you to imagine being told that all your children are gone. Not sick, not missing, not kidnapped, not lost in some accident you might have prevented. Dead. All of them. Every single one. The daughter who laughed like music. The son who had your eyes. The youngest who still called you with questions about life. The oldest who was just figuring out how to be strong. Gone. In a single day. In a single moment. While they were together, celebrating, living, being alive. Erased. And here's what undoes me. Here's what makes this story cut so deep, it feels like it's carving out your insides. Job has no idea why. He doesn't know about the cosmic conversation. He doesn't know that in the throne room of heaven, in the courts of the Almighty, his name was spoken. He doesn't know that Satan slithered into God's presence with accusation dripping from his tongue. He doesn't know about the challenge, the wager, the test of his faithfulness. He doesn't know Satan is watching to see if he'll curse God. He doesn't know this is part of some greater story, some larger purpose, some divine plan that might make sense of the senseless. He doesn't get a vision. He doesn't hear a voice from heaven saying, "Hold on, Job. I know this is hard, but trust me. There's a reason." No. All he knows is that his life just ended. All he knows is that the world he woke up to this morning, full of children and laughter and future and hope, no longer exists. All he knows is that the universe has suddenly become a cold, dark place where the center cannot hold and everything good can be ripped away without warning, without mercy, without explanation. He is standing in the wreckage of his entire existence. And what he does next is the most shocking thing in the entire story. The text says Job tore his robe. He shaved his head. These were the cultural expressions of devastating grief, the physical manifestation of a soul being ripped apart. The ancient world's way of saying, "I am undone, I am destroyed. The person I was an hour ago no longer exists." His hands moved through the rituals of mourning like a man in a dream, a nightmare from which there is no waking. And then Satan just lost the first round. But the test isn't over, because Satan comes back with a darker question.
Skin for skin. A man will give all he has for his own life. But touch his body, and he will surely curse you.
Translation: he can endure the loss of things. He can even endure the loss of loved ones. But touch his physical body, make him suffer personally, and the worship will stop. And God says,
Very well, he is in your hands, but you must spare his life.
And that's when Job's body erupts in boils, painful sores from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. He sits in the ash heap outside the city, the place where garbage burned, the place where lepers went, the place where the dead were cremated. Job takes a piece of broken pottery and scrapes his sores, and that's where his wife finds him. The woman who also lost all 10 children, the woman who's watching her husband's body rot. And she asks the question many of us have asked. Are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die. She's not being cruel, she's being honest. Translation: let this be over. If you curse God, maybe he'll just kill you and end this suffering. And Job responds, You are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble? But Job's suffering is about to get worse, because his friends are coming, and they're bringing theology. And here's what wrecks me. The text says, in all this, Job did not sin in what he said. Not he understood, not he felt at peace. He didn't sin in what he said, meaning internally, he was falling apart. The worship was real, but so was the agony. And that's where most of us live, isn't it? In the gap between faith and feeling, between what we believe and what we experience. 3 men hear about Job's catastrophe: Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar. These aren't strangers. These are his closest friends. They travel from distant places to comfort him, and when they see him, they don't recognize him. The sores have disfigured him. They weep aloud. They tear their robes. They throw dust on their heads. And then they do something beautiful. They sit with him in silence for 7 days and 7 nights. No one speaks, because they see his suffering is too great for words. This is the most helpful thing they'll do, because when they finally speak, they stop being comforters and become prosecutors. Job breaks the silence by cursing the day he was born. Wait, let me say that again. Job curses the day he was born, not God, his own existence. May the day of my birth perish, and the night that said, a boy is conceived. He wishes he'd never existed, but he won't curse God. And his friends can't handle it, because Job's suffering breaks their theology. See, they believe in something called retribution theology. Good things happen to good people. Bad things happen to bad people. Always, no exceptions. It's clean. It's simple. It makes the world make sense. And if you're prosperous, it means God approves of you. And if you're suffering, it means you sinned. So Eliphaz speaks, "Who, being innocent, has ever perished? Those who plow evil and sow trouble, reap it." Translation: Job, innocent people don't suffer like this. You must have done something. Bildad adds, "When your children sinned against him, he gave them over to the penalty of their sin." Translation: Your kids probably deserved to die. These are his friends, and they're torturing him with theology. Can you imagine? You've lost everything. Your body is rotting, your children are dead, and your closest friends tell you it's your fault. And here's the tragedy. They're not trying to hurt him, they're trying to help. Because if Job's suffering is his fault, then their world still makes sense. If Job sinned, then their prosperity is safe. But Job refuses to confess sins he didn't commit. For chapters, this debate rages. His friends accuse, Job defends. His friends explain, Job questions. And with every speech, Job's anguish deepens. And somewhere in the middle of this, Job says something that stops me every time. If only I knew where to find God. If only I could go to his dwelling, I would state my case before him. Do you hear it? Job doesn't want answers from his friends. He wants an audience with God. He wants to ask God directly. Why? But here's the mystery. God is silent. Day after day, week after week, Job sits in the ash heap. His friends accuse him. His body deteriorates. His heart breaks. And heaven says nothing. And if you've ever prayed and heard nothing back, if you've ever begged God for an explanation and received only silence, then you understand Job's true suffering. It wasn't the loss. It wasn't the pain. It was the absence, the feeling that God had abandoned him. But Job holds on, barely. At one point he says, "Though he slay me, yet will I hope in him." And in the very next breath, "I will surely defend my ways to his face." It's not peaceful surrender. It's defiant faith. It's saying, "I still believe in you, God, but I'm also furious with you." And that raw honesty, that refusal to pretend everything is okay, that's what makes Job's faith real. Because faith isn't pretending you're not in pain. Faith is staying in relationship with God while you're in pain. And just when it seems like the silence will last forever, just when Job and his friends have exhausted all their arguments, just when Job is ready to give up, the sky begins to darken. A wind starts to blow, and God finally speaks. God speaks to Job out of a storm, not in a gentle whisper, not in a comforting vision, out of a whirlwind. And his first words are, "Who is this that obscures my plans with words without knowledge?" After 37 chapters of Job crying out for God to speak, God's opening line is basically, "Who are you to question me?" And then God unleashes 4 chapters of questions, not answers. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Have you ever given orders to the morning or shown the dawn its place? Have you journeyed to the springs of the sea or walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been shown to you? Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades? Can you loosen Orion's belt? Do you give the horse its strength or clothe its neck with a flowing mane? Does the hawk take flight by your wisdom and spread its wings toward the south? Question after question after question about creation, about the cosmos, about animals, about weather, about the ocean, about the stars. And at first reading, it sounds like God is bullying Job, like God is saying, "Shut up, you're too small to question me." But listen closer. God isn't answering Job's questions. He's answering Job's doubt. Because Job's real question wasn't, "Why did this happen?" His real question was, "Are you still in control? Do you still care? Have you forgotten me?" And God's response is, "Look at the world I'm holding together. Look at the complexity. Look at the mystery. Look at the beauty and the terror and the intricate design. God is saying, I'm running the universe. The same power that sets boundaries for the ocean, the same wisdom that teaches birds to migrate, the same strength that makes lightning, is at work in your life. God doesn't explain Job's suffering. He reveals his character. He shows Job that the God who governs chaos on a cosmic scale can be trusted with Job's chaos too. And here's what destroys me. God never tells Job about the conversation with Satan. He never explains that this was a test. He never says, "You passed, Job. You proved authentic faith exists." God lets Job live in the mystery, because the point isn't understanding. The point is trust. And Job, broken, scarred, confused, Job responds with words that still echo. Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. And then, my ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. He doesn't get answers, but he gets God. And somehow, that's enough. Not because the pain stopped, not because it all makes sense now, but because he encountered the living God. And in that encounter, something shifted. It's like the difference between hearing about someone and meeting them face to face. Job's faith was always real, but now it's personal. Now it's not based on blessings, it's based on relationship. And that's when the restoration begins. Not because Job earned it, not because he finally understood, but because God is who he says he is, a God who wounds and heals, who takes away and restores, who walks with us through the fire and brings us out on the other side. The text says God restored Job's fortunes, doubled everything he lost, new flocks, new wealth, new respect, and then 7 more sons and 3 more daughters. The same number he lost, but not the same children. And I think that's important, because restoration doesn't mean forgetting. Job lived with scars. He lived with memories. He lived with questions that were never fully answered. But he also lived with unshakable faith, because he met God in the darkness. And that changed everything. So what do we do with Job's story? How do we live when God is silent? How do we hold on to faith when the bottom falls out? Here's what Job teaches us. First, your suffering is not a math equation. Good people suffer. The rain falls on the just and unjust alike. Job's friends tried to make his pain make sense. They needed a formula. They needed control. But life doesn't work that way. And when we try to explain someone else's suffering, when we say, everything happens for a reason, or God won't give you more than you can handle, we become Job's friends. Well-meaning, theologically confident, completely unhelpful. Sometimes the most faithful thing you can say is, I don't know why, but I'm here. Second, honest anger is more faithful than fake peace. Job didn't pretend. He didn't put on a spiritual mask. He screamed at God. He questioned. He demanded answers. And God called him righteous. But God rebuked his friends, who said all the right things, because God prefers raw relationship over polished performance. You don't have to hide your pain from God. He can handle your questions, your anger, your doubt. What he can't work with is pretending. Third, the presence of God is greater than the answers from God. Job never got the explanation he wanted, but he got something better. He got God himself. And in the end, that was enough. Not because the pain disappeared, but because he wasn't alone in it. Maybe you're in your own ash heap right now. Maybe you're scraping your wounds with broken pottery. Maybe your friends are failing you. Maybe heaven feels silent. Maybe you're one prayer away from walking away from faith entirely. I can't tell you why you're suffering. I can't give you a timeline for when it ends. I can't promise that everything will be restored the way Job's was. But I can tell you this. You're not alone. God hasn't forgotten you, And your faith, even the size of a mustard seed, even barely hanging on, even mixed with doubt and anger, that faith is real, and it matters. Job's story doesn't end with explanations. It ends with this. After Job had prayed for his friends, the Lord restored his fortunes. Did you catch that? After he prayed for the friends who hurt him, after he forgave the people who accused him, after he extended grace to those who offered none. That's when the healing began. Because suffering doesn't just refine us, it has the power to transform us, to make us more compassionate, more honest, more dependent on God, more willing to sit with others in their pain. Job's story is 4,000 years old, but it's also happening right now, in hospital rooms, in bankruptcy courts, in empty nurseries, in broken marriages, wherever people are asking, why? Wherever God seems silent, wherever faith is hanging by a thread, Job's story says, hold on. The story isn't over. The God who sees you is still there, even when you can't see him, especially when you can't see him. And that is enough. Even in the darkness, especially in the darkness, God is still God, and your faith is still real.